Hello and welcome to this panel discussion on driving growth through experience research and modeling. My name is Naresh Ramdas, co-founder and managing partner at Nimbl Digital. Along with me are Joe Filipowicz, managing director of our advisory and strategy practice, and Teresa Merzen, PhD, lead researcher and head of our research practice. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to be discussing the importance of setting a strategy based on experience research and the different ways of using experience research through modeling. We have 2 or 3 different ways of doing it, and Joe will be talking about how we can leverage experience research in very practical ways. One of those ways is NimblConnect, which is a proprietary methodology for leveraging research specifically in this area. So let's get right into it. What exactly is experience-centric growth? In our view, it's combining human-centered design with strategic use of technology and data to transform the way businesses drive growth. Why is this important? I think most companies always, for the most part, focus on specific metrics of revenue growth, traditional metrics of revenue growth, market share, etc. But we believe one of the leading indicators of a company's health is the experience that your customers have with your products and services. Typically, companies focus in specifically and exclusively on customer experiences, but in our view, that's short-sighted. A better approach is to combine not just customer experiences, but employee experiences, the technologies and processes that underpin the employees that support the customer experience, and of course, as always, the data that drives all of it. And so over the next 30 minutes, as I mentioned, Teresa will be walking through how research underpins a lot of this to get started. And Joe is going to talk about the practical approaches to leveraging this research into actionable strategies. So how does experience-centric growth work? Essentially, we take a look at customer experiences, employee experiences, as I mentioned, the operational and processes that employees use to support customer experiences, and then, of course, the underlying technology and data that supports all of this. But where to begin? We believe very strongly that before you even begin with customer journeys or employee journeys or anything else, research is fundamental to getting started with this strategy. And so we're going to jump right into what it means to do some of this foundational research and why it's helpful. Teresa, over to you.
Thanks, Naresh. Okay, I want to start by saying UX research stands for user experience research. That's what the X stands for. It's really the study of your customers and employees' experience when they're performing tasks. And what we're trying to uncover is a combination of things. Their needs that they're trying to fulfill, their expectations of a product or service that they're hoping will meet those needs, and their behaviors. As Naresh was mentioning, we want to see like what they're actually doing. And that type of experience, as he emphasized, is both the experience of the end user of a product you might be creating, but also the experience of employees in your business and what it's like for them to use different technologies and processes. So we want to make sure we're getting a very holistic viewpoint of that. It's also very important for us to understand the context that impacts both your employees and your end users experience. That could be the environment, maybe it's the office or the factory in which different processes are taking place, as well as the situational circumstances. So we always try to take those different factors into mind. But I want to make sure we get into the different details of them. Okay, so the central benefit of UX research is to understand your users, as I said, be they your customers and or employees, so we can help, you can build better products and services with their experiences in mind. Now, I'm going to turn to the attention first to the customer insights, right? When we're investigating products or services for your customers, what you're aiming to learn are how to fix their frustrations when they're performing tasks, because tasks are always, what they're ultimately trying to perform, whether they're their employee or end customer. And you're also trying to stay ahead of their expectations for what your product can do. You don't want to be lagging behind in what other competing products out there are providing. So you want to make sure you're staying ahead. And you also ultimately want to make sure you're delivering a resonating experience for them, something that delights them, something that makes them come back. Now, turning our attention to the employee type of insights. When you're investigating either the tools that they're using, the services that they're using, or the workflows that they're engaged in, you're ultimately aiming to learn what processes or tools are keeping them motivated, right? What actually helps them do their job better and keep them, wanting to perform at their peak. You're also wanting to help understand what creates or adds to a workspace that makes them want to stay, right? Efficient processes, efficient workflows, great technology helps them want to continue doing that work with you. And then what are the tools or workflows that help them work smarter? So we're trying to also, as Naresh was saying earlier, not just make for a better experience at the end for the person who buys your product, but we want to make sure the experience for the employees are helping create that product or service are also being enhanced. So this is why our attention turns in that direction. Now, as was said in the beginning, you may have metrics. You may track and have reliable business metrics that let you know, how you're performing numerically, right, with certain number of sales, et cetera. But without user experience research, you're missing the background story of why these occur. UX research basically sheds light on the hidden problems in your product design or your workflows, as well as anything like team dynamics or even the technology that help you, and so you can actually help address those setbacks. Sometimes studying these issues may warrant you analyzing the back-end data behind your technology, right? You might end up wanting some of your data scientists to look into, maybe there are some setbacks that can be enlightened behind like what's happening that's not working quite right in the technology. It also might take gathering observable patterns of behavior among your employees or users to understand the complex experiences that they have. So basically, UX research uses whatever methods, numeric or qualitative, et cetera, that are needed to uncover the solutions that basically will help you boost engagement, spark innovation, and even drive growth for your company. Now, if you're a newcomer to UX research, you might be unaware of how research methods may vary by multiple characteristics. Depending on your research objectives, you can choose between any of various methods that fall into these different kinds of characteristic categories along these spectrums. So for example, at the top, we have exploratory or discovery research, which varies significantly from evaluative research. We have attitudinal types of methods that vary from behavioral methods. Next is participatory methods that vary from observational, and finally qualitative that differ from quantitative. So let's just kind of use some examples to make these kind of relatable for you. Discovery research can be used to understand employees' current behavior. Before, for example, you might choose to engage in changing some operational process. You need to have like a baseline. Maybe you want to observe how employees are engaging now with the workflow before you make some changes to it. You need to know what they're doing before those changes take place. Now, that's going to be very different from a method you would use to gather insights about how they react to any changes. That's considered evaluative research, right? So you want to make sure you're using slightly different tools and techniques that would let you get insights regarding how they responded to the changes in operational procedures that you enacted across the company, for example. I'll give you another real-world example. Qualitative methods would be what you need to observe behaviors enacted by your customers to gather rich details about them. So maybe, for example, you might be using ethnography to watch someone engage with your actual product firsthand, or you might invite several different end users to be participating in an in-depth interview to gather, rich details about how did you feel when you were doing this? What steps did you take next? Why did you do that, right? These are the kind of questions that would be asked during an in-depth interview. But what you might want to do in contrast is, in order to measure the likelihood of the behaviors you heard about at scale, right? Because each interview takes a long time. You basically devote an hour, sometimes maybe two, to observing or talking with people. And you can't do that with 200 folks. That's going to be quite a time-intensive ordeal. So what you might want to do is, once you've gathered some of that rich qualitative data, you might turn to a quantitative method, such as a survey, to see if similar patterns of behavior are also engaged by those who respond to the survey. So that's going to be a more quantitative method, and you can gather numeric, trends and whether those behaviors are common at scale. So those are just some examples, again, how these different methods can differ. And we know these choices are complicated. Here at Nimble, we'd help guide you by selecting the methods best suited for your business needs. So what we wanted to show here on this next slide is, by outlining each method's multiple characteristics, they can be plotted on axes. In this case, we created axes for the exploratory versus the evaluative scale, and also the qualitative versus the quantitative scale. So by placing a variety of different methods in this space, it actually helps you identify how they differ along those different characteristics. And furthermore, it helps you choose several complementary methods to give you different angles from which you can study your issue area. So again, to make this kind of a real world scenario rather than just a series of dots, let me go through some examples to make it real. So let's start with an example of combining ethnography and card sorting. So for example, if you started with ethnography, right, perhaps in watching users perform tasks with your product, you've recognized that they differ in how they may prioritize using parts of the product. Maybe certain people spend a lot of time on one page of your app. Others spend a different amount of time on a different page, right? So you're seeing that there's going to be differences in how they prioritize using different pages of your app. But card sorting, if you follow that ethnography with card sorting, you can provide a much more explicit exploration of how users rank using various parts of the product. So while you were qualitatively gathering it from observing people's behavior with the product, the card sorting basically tasks them right there to say, okay, which of these pages is the most important for you to engage with? It's a nice little complement to the first task. It basically provides more pointed, targeted interest in what different pages of your app are prioritized by them. Next up, we'll give an example between two other types of methods put together. This one would be user surveys combined with workshops. So say, for example, that you wanted to field a survey to understand your employees' sentiment surrounding an existing workflow. Maybe you had some hint that the workflow is creating some frustrations, maybe some bottlenecking, okay? So you basically field that to your employee base. But let's also say that upon getting the results, you get consistent ratings about different aspects of that workflow. You still need to understand why those ratings occur, right? Maybe some people maybe a number of people rated certain parts of the workflow negatively, but you don't really get to understand why. And to tell you also, it's a little hard to get those kinds of answers from an open-ended question in a survey. I'll tell you that right now. It's very difficult. So you really would probably do better combining a survey with another method. And in this case, we put forth workshops, right? By combining the surveys with this method, you can speak to, for example, a range of different employees and ask them to elaborate on their reasons for viewing the workflow in a certain way. So again, the whole point here to visualize is that no method needs stand alone. You can actually use one or a myriad of different methods to just basically get at the answers that you need. You're basically trying to answer certain questions to basically better your employee business experience as well as the experience of end users. So we're just going to go past that one. Just kind of go to the end here. So basically, once you've done that data collection, once it's complete, you do need to make sense of the patterns that arose in both your employees and users' behaviors, attitudes, or expectations. So you can use that data to ultimately make positive changes, both internal to your business and externally. Now, that's no small task. Okay, this is a major part of user research. Data gathering is just step one. You have to basically know what to do with that data to bring about positive change. So most often, behavioral patterns are made clear by creating visual artifacts of the data trends. And these visuals become tools basically to help your company decide how to address those user pain points that you saw happening, or even create new opportunities for both your employees and your end users. So just to point out a couple on the list on the left-hand side, we're going to talk about storyboards, for example. A storyboard is a visual depiction. Think of it like, it can be almost looking like a comic strip, right? It's got little thumbnails of images, but it's a visual depiction of a user's experience with a product or service. So it might include, for example, an image of them unboxing the product when they first get it, another image depicting how they're setting up that item, or maybe going through the creation of a new account on the service, and also visually conveying their use of it and their sentiment during this engagement. What these storyboards help depict is it an enjoyable experience? Is it difficult? What is the general vibe, that we're getting from what people experience when they're working through different tasks related to that product? Now, by contrast, let's talk about the depiction of a customer and employee journey map, okay? Slightly different than a storyboard. These get more into the nitty-gritty of steps. Think of it like a roadmap. A journey map depicts the various touch points one has with a product or service through every step of a task. So let's just say you were focusing on the setup task, right? Setup of an account, setup of, you're being able to use a certain app again. So since journey maps visually delve into those specific steps, right? Basically on a board, it basically can be, there's different plot points that help you see like what their journey is like from beginning to end. It can pinpoint where users experience any difficulties, any bottlenecks, any frustrations in the process. So again, much like with the methods of data gathering, you need not only use one, or you need not only produce one. Sometimes various different visual products complement each other. So you might create storyboards as well as journey maps. You might as well create user personas. And each of these pieces of information visually depicting what the experience of your customers and employees are having can help bring to the surface the patterns of what their experience is like. Okay, so we want to always make sure we make it clear to whoever our audience is that they don't have to look at the raw data, which is very messy and complicated. We want to make sure that we're streamlining the clear patterns that emerge from our work. So yeah.
So Teresa, there's a quick question.
Yeah.
Many customers that we speak with understand the importance of research, but come in with a preconceived notion of what they think they already know about their customers and employees. Can you give us an example or two of things you've found running these types of researches where it has been completely at odds with what our clients really thought their customers were thinking of that?
I'm so glad you brought up that kind of a question, because a lot of times I think one of the problems, and I'll give you a specific example of a client I worked with, they might have their attention towards a certain subset of the population in which they're using, they're creating a product for. But sometimes that narrow scope of who they think they're designing for is missing the insights from another section of the population that's actually using their product. So we were working closely with several different technology companies, one of them being Google, for example, that creates products that are very wide, has a wide audience, right? They and others, we'll work with another small company you might not be familiar with, they have to keep in mind that there's going to be young and old, tech savvy, not so tech savvy, that are going to be coming to their products and basically maybe very familiar with those techniques of how to search for items, and others are not so familiar with it. So I think what user research helps outline for them is not just knowing like what their experience is, but who is even using your product. I didn't get into this as much, but some of discovery research helps point out who is actually your user, right? And what are their characteristics? If you start from there, you actually have a whole big picture opened up to you of saying, oh, I had no idea that maybe there's certain kind of generational members of this population who are using our product that are even part of it. Maybe we want to make sure we're accounting for their usage of the product as well as those that we had already considered. So that's one type of way that the UX research really pinpoints for you and opens your eyes to things you might not have considered. You also kind of gave the impression of a company that might say, oh, we already know what they want. We know how to do it for them. Things change over time, right? So maybe there might be a legacy customer who they think that they understand really well. And so they're continuing to design for someone who's been using the product for a long time. But user bases can always change. There can be new customers that they have not yet considered. Once again, user experience research can help pinpoint what are the expectations and the needs of people who are recent additions to the user base, so that we can account for, things that they may not have already known about that are legacy users from before.
Right.
Yep.
Very good examples. Thank you.
Yep. So basically, once we have these visual patterns of behavior depicted in various tools, turning them into recommendations for how to make users' experiences better is another whole process. Okay, it requires a new set of tools, which we see, some of which you see depicted on the right-hand side. And so, as Naresh mentioned at the top of this conversation, we want to dig into one of those particular tools that is very powerful. So I'm going to hand it over to Joe Flipowitz, who's going to go into great detail about NimblConnect using blueprints.
Thank you, Teresa. Joe, over to you.
Great, thanks, guys. So as you've heard so far in the webinar, we've explained why we feel experience is such a critical part of helping drive business success. And we've also now learned a little bit about the methods and approaches and tools provided by our research team to really uncover the details behind those experiences and start to understand them in greater detail. But still, what we found is that without linking them to a sort of the tangible architecture of a company, sort of the underlying technology layers, we still don't have a complete view. We may understand that there's a friction point related to some experience the user or our customer is having, but how do we start to sort of uncover why that's happening or what we can do to address it? If we go to the next slide, please. NimblConnect is our framework, our methodology for bringing all of this together. So the research expertise that we bring to the table and understanding those journeys and the personas that Teresa mentioned, but then also linking it to the underlying technology. It sounds a little confusing, but when you think about it, technology today enables all these experiences, all of these interactions with our customers and users. So understanding what drivers from a technology and architecture perspective are impacting those experiences is critical. So our NimblConnect methodology combines those two. So you'll see here in the images depicted in the bullets there, we start at the top with brand promise. Really, the fundamental element of a company's sort of existence is their brand and what they represent with that brand. So we try not to lose sight of that because that could impact how we want to address these shortcomings in the experience perspective. Then we layer on the customer and employee journeys, as Teresa was saying, understanding what a user is experiencing as they work through these business processes is important to inform, whether or not it's successful, it's a positive or a negative experience. This all ties to the business capabilities and process. What underlying processes within a business? We've all done business process mapping and modeling to try to make things more efficient. So understanding that business process and how that interacts with the journey is critical. The next layer that's depicted here is the application and integration layer. So in today's world, there's almost no experience, there's almost no interaction with a customer or a user that is not supported by some sort of technology, some sort of application. Applications need to be integrated, or else we run into the issue with silos of some kind, whether it's business process silos, lack of sort of communication and transparency. We've all experienced issues where one part of the company is not effectively integrating with another. This then relates to data challenges. So when those silos exist from a business process or an application perspective, now we also could potentially have data silos. But data informs and is the tool that management uses to inform their decision making. So making sure that we incorporate the data flows, the data repositories, the tools for analytics and dashboarding, is critical that we build that into this holistic view that we call NimblConnect. Once we have a vision of the critical elements, now, of course, it would be overwhelming to sort of build a framework like this out for every business process and every journey and every experience. But what the research enables us to do is identify the critical areas, the areas where we feel there's the most potential for improvement. Then we can dig deeper and start to decompose the whole experience into this holistic NimblConnect view with the underlying technology and architecture supporting it. As a result of that, the outcome that we're looking for is to identify opportunities, right? We're looking for inefficiencies. We found them through the research. We're trying to support how those inefficiencies are, supported or causing problems from a technology standpoint or from a data standpoint. All of that results in, areas that we can have identified to look for ways to improve, whether it's through changes in technology, improvement in reporting and analytics, better integration, whatever the case may be. We're looking for sort of the technology underpinnings to those experiences so that we can look to improve them. Okay, next slide. So this slide represents a few examples. So I think it's always useful to give a story context, especially one as complex as NimblConnect. So these are just some snapshots from engagements that we've done over the years that we've used to refine our approach and our methodology. You'll notice that really there's a variety of use cases for using NimblConnect. It's not always just a simple business process that we're trying to improve. In the first example there, we were looking at a legacy product that our client had that was not meeting the expectations of its user base. So we worked with a variety of constituent user communities to do the research required to understand how they were using these tools, what a day in their life looked like, how things could be optimized in terms of how the elements of the dashboards could be placed, the design elements of the various widgets or whatever you like to call them of the view, and then supporting those new experiences flows, the new experiences that the customers were looking for, with an internal process transformation that enabled these new views to be brought to life. The second one there was a technology modernization. This was a large company that dealt with billions of dollars in transactions that really were not optimized. And as you can see depicted there in the image, there were a lot of sort of friction points, pain points. This analysis uncovered a variety of situations, in this case, mostly related to underlying technology. The legacy technology, in this case, sort of core ERP modules, were not performing in a way that aligned with the company's business process. So there were a variety of manual workarounds and manual reports and phone calls that were trying to fill in these gaps that was resulting in a variety of issues with trouble tickets and refund requests and a variety of things. So by understanding that business process and where the sort of experience was not being optimally supported by technology, we were able to identify some technology improvements to really plug those holes, make the process much more seamless and sort of complete, and really drive user satisfaction and the trouble ticket volumes down and user satisfaction through the roof. The final option there, I won't go into look at all these, was a process improvement. This was for a large insurance company. They were doing some major system changes. They were migrating from a legacy platform that they had outsourced to bringing it in-house for a variety of their core platforms. So process improvement was critical because of the nature of how things were changing. They were bringing a lot of functions that had been outsourced back in-house. So not only understanding the systems that would support those, but also really optimizing the business processes and documenting those processes and helping create materials for training for those folks who are bringing this process back in house was critical. So this was an overwhelmingly complicated business process that we were able to help streamline and simplify using the sort of methodologies of NimblConnect.
Joe, quick question.
Yeah.
We're seeing here NimblConnect being applied to legacy product modernization or optimization, process improvement, new product development. What is the typical duration of something like this, and how do we pick that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll give you the consulting answer. It depends. I mean, we've seen sort of snapshot blueprints, something that we sort of really narrowed down to a very specific experience or a very specific set of technologies, where an 8 to 12 week engagement is enough to really break that down into the level of detail required. And we've seen other situations where it is more of an all-encompassing enterprise-wide analysis, and those can take significantly longer.
Thank you.
Great. I think we have one more slide. Yeah, so just to sort of sum things up, we like to refer to our NimblConnect outputs as blueprints. You got a sense from the look and feel of those that, like a blueprint, it's very complicated. There's a lot of information, a lot of detail. We try to, design those blueprints, the outputs of these engagements of NimblConnect in such a way as to address the very specific problems at hand, and it can be applied in a variety of different ways. So just a couple of examples here. Customer and employee experiences. That's the main sort of message, right? That we started with is understanding the customer, employee, just generally stakeholder experiences. So understanding those and understanding them in the proper context, whether that's the applications that support them, the data, the underlying data that is driving them, and so on. Understanding those customer and employee experiences in that way is really a powerful way to identify shortcomings in those experiences and look for ways to address them. So operational efficiencies. We've heard about business process modeling and journey mapping. In and of themselves, it's an incomplete story, and that's the sort of history and nature of how NimblConnect came about. There was sort of over years and refined iterations of doing these types of engagements that we came to this basic understanding of this methodology and framework that really is powerful if used in the right way. And of course, we've talked about technology. In today's environments, there's no business process, no user experience that's not impacted by the tech stack. So the combination of the powerful results of end user research combined with the expertise that someone sort of schooled in the sort of expertise of technology and architecture is really a powerful combination. It's not one that's often combined effectively. We feel that the connected blueprint is really the way to do that. And of course, data. We hear all the time, every day, about data, and how it drives companies, how it drives the company's success, the management tools that need the data to make proper decisions. We're working with a client today, a large CPG client, whose probably single biggest challenge in them getting products to market quickly relates to data and the challenges that they're facing in that space. That's universal. Data is critical for every blueprint that we've ever done. It's an important layer, important element that is only with the advancements in AI and machine learning is only becoming more and more critical. So I think that sort of sums things up. But in general, the combination of that research, understanding the user and their experiences, and combining that and layering that on with the technology underpinnings to understand how to improve, how to optimize, is a very powerful approach, a very powerful methodology that we feel that we've really done a great job with the NimblConnect methodology to be able to enable that for our clients.
Right. Thank you, Joe. So just to summarize, I think Teresa and Joe, you bring up some powerful points about not just getting into the details of experience-led growth, but coming up with creative ways in which we can model this experience-led growth. And I think it's a fundamental shift in how people think about experience strategy, because it's not just disconnected journeys that one group within a company might do, and an IT group within that same organization is also progressing along a roadmap of modernization or optimization or what have you. This combines both because it answers the question of the central question is, how do you improve experiences for your stakeholders? And what do you need to do within the organization in terms of technology and processes to improve that? And like we mentioned earlier in the call, I think that stakeholder experience is a leading indicator of the health of any company. And we believe very strongly in our approach helping clients manage this process. So we have a little bit about Nimbl as well, but since we're coming to the end of this discussion, I'll leave that for you to check out our website or even this deck that'll be published after the webinar. And thank you everyone for attending. Teresa and Joe, thank you so much. And look forward to hearing from the audience. Thank you.